supporting women-owned businesses as well as
was trying to reach our community. They got credibility in the eyes of our community members because they were kind of partnering with them.
But finally, in 1992, I got my first permanent job with the Minister of Agriculture.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the CASA Foundation for International Development's celebration of Africa Day. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. We appreciate you taking time off of your busy schedules to join us tonight. Thank you to all of our members, guests, and panelists for joining us. My name is Emma, and I am your host for this evening. We are very honored to have leaders from the Black community with us today, entrepreneurs from diverse sectors, and youth of African descent representing different parts of the globe. Let us take this opportunity to celebrate Africa Day. This day represents the annual commemoration of the founding of the Organization of African Union, OAU. This day is celebrated across the world by Africans and people who are working closely in the African continent, be it business people, scholars, nonprofit workers, professionals, and leaders. On this special day, I would like to convey my best wishes of peace and prosperity to all Africans while celebrating this most auspicious event of the year. CASA Foundation for International Development is celebrating this year's event with the theme of the contribution of the African diaspora in Canada to build the African continent. We must commend African diaspora in their engagement in Canada through entrepreneurship, innovation, and the transfer of knowledge and skills. These actions help strengthen the wider African and Canadian communities as a whole. In addition, we must recognize Canada's efforts to collaboratively work and support the African people in terms of trade, investment, healthcare, agriculture, education, and digital opportunities for sustainable growth on the continent. To all our participants and audience members, this is a live session. You will have the opportunity to engage through the chat, and you will also have the opportunity to ask a few questions after the roundtable discussion. So please leave any comments or questions in the chat box, and our team will pick them up from there. Our team will also address some of your questions as we go along and add resources that you may need in the general chat box on YouTube. So if you also wanted to let us know where you're connecting from, that would be great as well. I'm connecting from Ottawa, so what about you? I also encourage you all to share the CASA Foundation YouTube link with any groups, associations, and friends you may have so that they can take advantage of this session with esteemed Black leaders, founders, and groups featured here today. To formally begin this session, I would like to invite Dr. Olutoyin Oilade, President of CASA Foundation for International Development, to share her thoughts on this occasion. Thank you, Dr. Olu.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Emma. And thank you everyone again tonight. It's such a pleasure. It's a great honor to have you all here with us tonight. I see all my people, and it's such a great pleasure to meet you, Chietze and Koulibaly. Good to have you on this call. I'm not sure if we have all our special guests ready, but I'm going to go on anyway, knowing that we'll just go along the fray. Tonight, mine is it's a very simple task. I have a privileged task of welcoming you all to this forum tonight. And I must quickly say that this is the very first time we're celebrating Africa Day at CASA Foundation, and for the simple reason that earlier on in the month, we were contacted by some of the officials that we represent for, at the federal level, and they wanted to know which dates are most important to us for the first 6 months of the year. And if we do have a few other days that would be representative of the community that we represent generally. And, that came up and I said, oh, it must be Africa Day, because that happens to be celebrated across the African continent on the 25th of May every year. And they wondered because I said, oh, this is Asian History Month and we've never really heard about Africa Day. Where did you get that from? And so I had to go do some research into that history and I got the papers together and I forwarded it to our, the account officers at that level. And they said, oh, wow, we're going to make sure that we add this to the list of days to be celebrated in Canada. And so I thought, why not start again and then bring our people around the table and let's talk about Africa again. Of course, we do have normal conferences that we hold October towards the fall of every year, but this is a different one. And the reason we're having a session like this today is so that we can actually bring community leaders around the table to talk about the Africa we want. And so I do have that pleasure of hosting you all today, and I'm really indeed glad to welcome our special guests. And I'll be talking about that just in a bit. Once again, thank you for the warm welcome, Ima, and thank you to all our special guests. Dekule Akintayo, from the head of technical petroleum at Qatar Petroleum. We'll get to meet you soon. I know you're coming in from the Kingdom of Qatar, and I'm not sure what time it is tonight, but it's a pleasure to have you here. It's a pleasure to also have you, Chietza, at the Director of Strategy at Black Business Initiative in Canada. Thank you so much, Smaila Coulibaly, coming in as President of African Diaspora Organization for Canada, and Mr. Emmanuel Jodu, the President of the Ghana Canadian Association of Canada. It's a great pleasure. Indeed, it gives me great joy to have you all here tonight. Various fora across the African continent. I know for sure that the celebration of Africa Day is ongoing. We've joined a few because it's a heavy celebration across Africa. However, for us in the West, what does this mean to us? Usually we come around the table, we talk about Africa, challenges of Africa, the benefits of growing up from home, and then coming into the West to do the bit that we can. But today is a day to celebrate the accomplishments of Black people of African descent. Despite our many challenges, the Africa that Africa continues to face at every turn of its trajectory, it's important that we celebrate our rich history, our great culture, and the diversity that has birthed many, many giants across the continents, across the nations, across the globe generally. Africa has been described in many ways. The dark continent, the lost continent, the one at the bottom, always below the radar, various descriptions on the global map. It's actually located at the very bottom, if you noticed. And some say to us that actually depicts the fact that Africa is always last. And perhaps as part of its description or the trajectory, what we've seen so far, it's actually a function of the fact that of where it is located on the global map. It's also described as a land of infrastructure deficit. As a matter of fact, the African Development Bank estimates the infrastructure gaps in Africa by about 170 billion when you go on to about by 2024. Right now, it's at 100 billion, a land of deficits, and that's why it's described as that. I've always pondered on how the average regular African survives both, when they come out. Of course, we can imagine what goes on back on the continent, but when they come out, they come out and they're looking to start afresh in a new land. But I think, to my mind, and from my experience, our uniqueness, what makes us unique as Africans, is the fact that that uniqueness is actually found in our resiliency. The fact that we're very resilient. It's been, rough roads and all of those, but it makes us stronger. It makes us very strong, and we're able to face adversity. Also, the benefit of our diversity. I stand to be corrected, but I do believe that as Africans, there must be over 2,000 tribes, 2,000 languages across Africa, so diverse. But that therein actually lies our greatness, our uniqueness, what makes us rich and what makes us able to stand together in every situation that we find ourselves. So what do we do with the infrastructure deficit and all of the challenges that we're faced with on a daily basis? Well, one thing for sure we know is that when we come together, we're able to move. And when I say move, it's almost like a movement, where we believe in it, we go ahead and make it happen. We make it happen. We make things happen, not only in the West, but even back at home. Africa is huge on diversity. In the West, we're a community with a rich history of inventions. When you go around looking at all of the things that the African community have been able to put together, particularly during the pandemic, new businesses that have been created, within the pandemic, during the pandemic. It is kudos to the African community. And the people that relate to us as friends of the African community, as business partners, as supporters of the African community, as people of color generally, they have been beneficiaries of the great inventions and the innovation that the entrepreneurs and the startup businesses of the African community have put together. How can we continue to celebrate our uniqueness, our diversity on a daily basis? And how can we transition from the current day Africa to the Africa that we actually want, which is actually the theme of this, today's roundtable? Well, to our esteemed guests, I can only say I do not actually claim to have any answers or most of the answers to this. I would leave that to the panelists that will be discussing today at the roundtable. However, I can share maybe about 2 points from my list. And the first on the list that is most important and dear to my heart will be that question of value, the values that we espouse. Everything in life yields to value. People usually get back the value that they bring to the table. And the same goes for nations, whether as a continent, as professionals, business-oriented people, or in our community generally. We need to up the game and be intentional about how we add value to our nation, whether it's at the governmental level, political, professional, business. It's all about value. Every great nation follows some principles and values. The greatness of any nation is it's inherent in the values that it espouses. It's a direct result of the laws that govern the land, the policies, the practices, the value they place on people, how people are treated, how policies are interpreted, how policies are executed, what it means to them. Gaps in those policies, how are they corrected? How are they brought to the table? And who are the people that are appointed to execute? It's all about a question of value for me personally. And that's why I would love for us again to look at this carefully, to focus on values and to insist on emplacing some new principles, perhaps. A rejig, an adjustment of some of this might actually birth for us again the Africa that we want, or lead us towards the Africa that we want. How do people do things? Corrective measures, how are they implemented? Who is accountable? What makes them accountable? Who are they accountable to? Whether in leadership, in our own little spaces, as people in business, or as professionals in the workplace. This is so critical and it's important to us. So the little efforts we make at every point in time will lead us towards the Africa that we want from our own private spaces. At CASA Foundation, our theme says, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. So try and do something good today. It's just a simple way of describing that. It's the summation of the very good things that we do in our own little spots and corners that will amount to the good things that Africa actually becomes known for. As simple as that sounds, I believe it will resonate deeply with a child and a professional at the same time. Keep in mind, value may not necessarily come from where we give value, but it will always come back to you because it's a law of nature for you to always reap what you sow. As a matter of fact, one of the people we listened to way back, one of the people I read from time to time, the voice of reason, the voice of courage, and the voice of wisdom, would say to you, people are most likely, and that's Obafemi Awolowo, he would say, people are most likely to reap even more than they sow. because that's a law of nature. And so it's important. The second point I'd like to make quickly tonight is that we need to create wealth. It's got to be a continuum. It's going to be a continuum. The Africa we want is an Africa a continent where wealth creation is done rapidly through an empowerment of its small businesses. As you can imagine, in the West, where most of us have found ourselves tonight, perhaps a few people are also listening to us from across the continent of Africa. But in the West, we realize that more than 65% of the small businesses have become the engine of the economy. The startup businesses, the small businesses, those are the ones at pre-revenue stage. They have a way of doing business and becoming empowered to do business in such a manner that they contribute effectively to what is now called the national economy. So national prosperity is generated by more than 65% of the small businesses. Africa, again, needs to reinvent itself to get to a stage where the innovators, the inventors, the creators, or the people that are creative are encouraged, are empowered, are advanced, and are supported through capital, mentorship, scholarship, and an enabling environment where the work of these groups of people dovetails into profit, revenue, and huge benefits for the national prosperity of each of the nations within Africa. I'm not going to take too much of your time, as I believe my time is around about all. I still have a few more points, but I reckon that maybe during the panel discussions, Q&A, if I'm allowed, I might come in and then maybe support some of the, by answering some of the questions and contribute to that. And so I'm just going to stop at this point and let the panelists, our esteemed panelists of today, take the floor and actually share the great insights that we do know that they have, so that we can go on and save some time. So thank you so much for listening. And back to you, Ima. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ulu, for your inspirational words. I'm now delighted to welcome and introduce our moderator and our roundtable participants as well. I'll start with our moderator, Shidza L. Jones. She's currently the Director of Corporate Strategy, Research, and Communications with the Black Business Initiative, a business development organization dedicated to supporting Black businesses in Atlantic Canada to start, grow, and compete in the mainstream business community. She is also BBI's project lead for supporting Black Canadian Communities Initiative, which supports capacity building for Black-led and Black-serving not-for-profit organizations across Canada, and has to date funded over 240 of those organizations with a total of over $8.5 million. Shidza has been working in the nonprofit sector for several years, supporting communities and organizations through project management, research, data management, evaluation, communications, grant administration, and advocacy. She is a certified project manager with a master's degree in international development studies. I'm also pleased to introduce our first panelist, Adekunle Akintayo. He is the National Head of Technical Production at Qatar Petroleum, with responsibility for production, management, and distribution. In other advisory roles, Akintayo serves as the VP of Business Development at Invicap. He had previous experience as business analyst and consultant at the financial giant Anderson LLP, leading business assurance, at KBR, leading global engineering, construction, and services company for the civil infrastructure sector. He was a project manager and coast engineer, leading teams in the UK on several multi-sector million-dollar infrastructure projects between 2007 and 2012. And he was part of the team that executed the Gordon LNG $50 billion project in Western Australia. Adekunle holds an MBA from the Manchester Business School and a Master's in Science and Mechatronics from King's College London, and a Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering from Nigeria's University of Lagos. Our second panelist is Mr. Sumaila Kulibeli, and he is a financial analyst, father of 2 girls and 1 boy, and consultant of the federal government, including Fisheries and Oceans Canada and Elections Canada. He's the president of the African Diaspora Organization of Canada and project manager of the Atlas Project for regrouping Malians in the national capital of Ottawa, Gatineau. And last but not least, our third esteemed panelist is Mr. Emmanuel Dodu. Emmanuel is the president of the Ghanaian Canadian Association of Ontario, which is headquartered in Toronto. He is passionate about serving the community, and this role provides him with a sense of purpose and fulfills his altruistic aspirations. Additionally, the ministerial role that Emmanuel plays in his church anchors his beliefs and values that all human beings are created in the image of God, and therefore we need to treat each other with respect and decorum. Emmanuel Dudu works in the banking industry and has 28 years of experience. Now I'd like to hand it over to Shidza to facilitate the roundtable discussion. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma, and welcome to everyone once again for joining us for the Commemoration of Africa Day hosted by CASA Foundation. Thank you so much, Dr. Oyelade, for putting this together as well. I'm very excited to be moderating this roundtable with an esteemed panel of professionals and powerhouses from the African continent. So thank you so much to all of you for joining us. Now, for this roundtable, it's very important as we have a conversation about how it is that the African diaspora in Canada can contribute to building the African continent. And so I will be asking a series of questions to our panelists in order to see if we can get closer to some of those answers. We know that Dr. Oyelade has already provided us with 2 points that we can think about. And so this is a great opportunity for us to build off of that. So my first question to the panelists, and because this is around investment, I will start with Mr. Adekunle Akintayo is what are the key steps or the approach to investing in Africa? And what are the tips for a Canadian entrepreneur to invest in Africa or start a business in the continent?
Thank you, and good evening to all of you. Firstly, I wanted to say thank you for having me on the discussion tonight. And thank you to CASA Foundation for putting the event together as well. I think the steps to investing in Africa, your question relates to the steps in investing in Africa. I think it's not different for the steps that you need to take to invest in anywhere else. First, we need to at least identify what the gaps are in that society, understand what those gaps are, understand the markets, understand the regulatory requirements, be willing to take the risk, and then go in to make the investment. So again, I summarize what I've said. First, understand the gaps, understand the regulatory framework, understand the investment requirements in terms of the financial muscle, be willing to take the risk before we go into to actually do the investment. Dr. Oyelade alluded to something in our opening remarks. She was talking about the infrastructural gap in Africa. 175 billion trillion she mentioned there. Those numbers vary depending on which of the international agencies that you're talking to, but that number is in the ballpark. It's in the ballpark. And when you look at it, what you will find is that gap mainly is in major infrastructure, be it roads, be it food, be it healthcare delivery. In every sector, Africa is crying out for investment. When you say, what are the steps that you need to take? I think it will come down to the local nations. Every area across the continent is looking out for investment, but the regulatory framework in each of those countries, which vary according to the countries, is going to be the determinant of how we're going to be able to put the investment in those countries.
Thank you so much, Adekunle. And you're very right. I think often the term Africa is used and people assume that it's a monolith, but those regulatory differences certainly exist country to country. So that's something that should always be kept in mind. I'll pass it on to Sumaila. So the same question around the key steps to or the approach to investing in Africa, and what tips you would have for a Canadian entrepreneur who's looking to invest or start a business on the continent.
Thank you very much to give me this honor and this privilege to address for all of you. And thank you, Emma. Thank you, Dr. Olu, and for CASA Foundation to give us this opportunity to discuss with the African all people today. And before I'm starting, I want each from you to say happy Africa Day, and all of the people watch us from YouTube or other platform. And coming back for your question, and I'm agree with my colleague Adekunle, is the approach is not really different on anywhere. If you think about like business school, every business school teaching same thing. So, but they can just teach you, if you go somewhere, you need maybe to adapt your situation about the culture and about, that is just the point. But definitely, if we talk about how is the globalization, the type of the business is the same thing around of the world. So that I'm gonna say to starting for now.
Thank you so much, Sumaila. And that's very true. Those same sentiments that you have to know what the conditions may be in that particular country, or the regulatory what may be in place in those particular countries is very important to note. Emmanuel, do you have anything to add to this question in terms of any other tips that you may have for a Canadian entrepreneur who's interested in investing in Africa or starting a business?
Yeah, anyway, just to build on what Mr. Akintayo and Mr. Coulibaly have just said, they are very right. Any investment decisions you have to go through the due diligence. Just like whether you're investing in Canada or United States or any part of the world, you have to go through some checklists of what you want to do. But I think, to me, when we say investing in Africa, we're talking about a giant continent with about 1.2 billion people, about 50-something countries. So to me, the first question to be answered, which part of Africa are you going to invest? And what area do you want to invest? Because investment in Niger is different from investment in Nigeria, depending on the culture, the people, and the infrastructure, and in fact, the resources. So to me, the first thing is that, number one, what do you want to invest in? And number two, which part of the continent do you want to invest in? And number three, what is your passion as far as the investment is concerned? Is it going to be in agriculture? And if it is in agriculture, which country is best suited for you? If it is going to be financial industry, then you have to look at the demographics in that continent. And let's say if you're investing in something like, maybe climate, change type of investment, then which part of the continent are you looking at? Now, then you also have to look at it that if it is, let's say, IT or maybe ICT, then you have to look at what are some of the strengths in that part of Africa where you think you can get, your return on investment. So to me, just to add to what Mr. Akintayo said, I don't want to, go through that anymore, or maybe Mr. Coulibaly, but I think what the fundamental question is that which part of Africa do you intend to invest? That is critical. And in fact, you have to look at the strengths of those parts of Africa that will suit your investment needs.
Thank you so much, Mr. Duodu. So as we've heard, which part of Africa do you want to invest in? What do you want to invest in? What is the regulatory framework? And also, are you willing to take the risk? Mr. Akintayo made mention of that, just in terms of, are you willing to take the risk? Because we know that with entrepreneurship, there are risks that are associated with it, but the return is often great if everything works as it should. All right, so next question. Though there are some fast-growing economies in Africa, the continent still holds some of the poorest nations in the world. Can entrepreneurship create some universal solutions for issues such as poverty or food insecurity? And can you also talk about social entrepreneurship and how a Canadian entrepreneur can contribute to solving those critical issues? I'll start with Mr. Duodu in this case.
No, that's a very good question. You know, I guess I'll be remiss if I do not, in fact, express my appreciation to Dr. Oyelade. I should have said that earlier on, you know, but it's not too late to say that I'm fascinated about what she's doing with CASA Foundation. She's been a shining star in our community here in Canada, and I want to applaud her for all the work she's doing for over the years. And I know that she's always giving platform for the African in diaspora, you know, to be able to come together to drive solutions for African business, development. I want to thank her for that, and CASA Foundation as well. Now, based on, Africa, and I think your question was the entrepreneurship. You know, when I look at China and India, when you look at it, not long ago, we knew, maybe about 30 years ago, China had only maybe less than 5% who were middle class. 30 years ago, that's not too long at all. Now, at this time, when you look at it, China has maybe about 300 million people who have moved to the middle income. In fact, part of the society. Now, talk about India. India, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, India was also in the same category. But I'm giving this premise to let you know that everything is possible. Now, what from the Indian strategy is this. They realize that there is an opportunity to provide IT resources to the world. That's what they did. What did they do? The first thing they did was to ensure that they can build a huge human capital. And they invested a lot in IT. Guess what? Today, when you look at all the big corporations, what they're doing is that global resourcing is in India. Indians do not necessarily have to come here to build wealth. They don't need to come to the United States. If you go to Chennai and all those places, you know that people who are there. And even if they are given about 20% of a software developer in Silicon Valley, that is a huge income in India. That's what is happening. In China, when we look at the China story, this is significant. Manufacturing. Today, China is leading in that area. And I'm making this point to say that any investor who goes into this country, they have the mindset that, in fact, this is ICT in India. Then you also have China, which is in the manufacturing hub of the world now at the moment. Now, in Africa, these two models, there can be a convergence of both. One, in the ICT world, and also in manufacturing in Africa. And I'm saying this for a reason. Number one, when you look at our population, we have the youngest population in the world. And we also have huge, federal lands. In fact, the uncultivated land in Africa is about 75%. So that is an opportunity to be able to develop the African continent. But I'm using this model to say that the potential to be able to build, the continent of Africa by direct investment is huge. And I think your question was that, how do we, maybe as a Canadian investor, or maybe an American investor, what can I do, or what should I be looking to do to make sure that I can, have a drive investment that have social implications? And when you look at Africa, there is always a saying that to every problem, there is an opportunity. And when you look at African continent today, there is a huge opportunity for infrastructure development. There is a gap. And if you are in Canada and you want to invest in Africa, we should look at those challenges as an opportunity to invest in those continents. And that comes with a high rate of return as well. Now, if we look at it maybe from the standpoint of agriculture, huge, when we look at it, there is a huge consumption base, even in the continent, among the African countries. This is 1.2 billion people. That is huge. So the point I'm trying to emphasize over here, that looking at a model, what is happening in China and what is happening in India, I'm stating this point to say that all is possible. But we can make that leap to that level, number one, if we Africans, we create a right environment for investors to be able to come in and invest in that continent. Okay? So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dodo. And I like what you said, that, for every problem, there is an opportunity. And that gap, that infrastructure gap keeps coming up. And so there's definitely opportunity there. And looking, as you mentioned, at China, looking at India, and just being able to take advantage of globalization and seeing how it is that the continent can leverage that for its development is important. All right, and I will move this on to Mr. Coulibaly.
Yeah, so thank you again for that question. So definitely, I want to just return one word on your question. Talk about social entrepreneurship. Because if you see in Africa, so the people believe the state can all for us. The state can provide food, health, road, and everything. But that is not true. Look at in Canada, how many bank food we are here, or the people have a income and everything. But that means the people needed all the time people to solve some problem. So in Africa, yes, is it true? People sometimes don't have a food. So if the diaspora or anyone can do the business to grow the food and the people have access on the food, that is going to be the solution. So definitely, and if you see there's so many organizations we have, and I discuss, I just general, like you have an international program for food. How long they've been in Africa, but we don't have a food anywhere. So that means they need it here, but that's going to be like, I don't know how a question to say, okay, they're doing the bad job or good job until they're working. But the point now is us, how we can help our back country to solve, for example, food issue. The food issue is there. In Canada, yes, the people have like 3 meals per day, but in Africa is really the issue. So if we can make the entrepreneur some business to make a food, that is gonna be really fine. So if, for example, in the other side, the people need really to work together. So to look at it, where the state or the government can do something, that is the place we can do. So I think it's gonna be like a partnership. If we can say in Africa, the people never realize, okay, the government must provide food, must provide health, must provide a road, but the people, I think it is our duty, and the people like us come out to Africa now to teach them, no, we can solve that in other position. If you take the financial budget for any government in Africa, they can't solve all problems they have. So that is why I really agree the diaspora or any entrepreneurship or any business we can do and we have a lot issue there. And yes, poverty is an issue. If we can create a job, the business, and it's gonna create a job, and it's gonna create a more income for the people, and we can solve this poverty problem. And the food, so I already mentioned it, is a problem. So, can I give a chance to Adekunle to say added something?
Thank you so much, Mr. Coulibaly. And just some of what you said reminded me of Dr. Dambisa Moyo's book, Dead Aid, and just the need, I think, for African countries to be able to see how it is that they can become self-sustaining to some degree, as opposed to being very dependent on aid. And so I think some of that really comes into social entrepreneurship in terms of how do you find those solutions that are long-term and wean the African continent off aid. So thank you so much for that. Mr. Akintayo, to you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I think both Mr. Emmanuel and Mr. Coulibaly made two very critical points there that I will not create a new point. I will just support what they have said earlier. Now, I think the first point that Mr. Emmanuel made was the fact that it's doable. So he gave us the example from India and China. Let me add a third example to it, and that's the example from Brazil. When President Lula was the president of Brazil less than 10 years ago, I mean, they were credited that that government brought out more than 30 million people out of poverty. Yeah, and that's the last time that a government has done something that big. Why and how did they do it? Simple things, you know, for a child to go to school, you know that education is number one. You want children to go to school, so you pay their parents to go to school. In this current generation, that family may not be able to succeed properly, or in the next generation, because that child already has education, he can go to the next step. So number one thing is that Africans need to agree and believe that this is doable. Do you understand? There's no need for us to talk so much about it until we believe that this can be done. It can be done. People have done it. Brazil did it recently. Okay. Then I come to what Mr. Coulibaly said. He focused on the issue of food. You know, and, you know, because again, that's the fundamental of life. And I wanted to use that as an example. I always ask people, have you ever thought about it, why Chinese food is popular around the world? Indian food is becoming very popular around the world. Yeah. Everywhere you go around the world today, people are talking about Korean food of late, you know, Korean food. But no matter where you go, I walk around the world a lot. What you will find is that you will not find a viable African restaurant. And making food is not a complicated issue. It's not complicated. It's very basic. So it goes to what I've said earlier. Are we willing to take the risk? Are we willing to invest? Just look at Canada as do you understand? You have food standards in Canada today. You have people who work in food in Canada, who do processing in Canada. They have the skill set. Why are we not using that to develop the market in Africa? Why? Because we don't want to take the risk. We're not ready to. So two things. One, we must believe that it's possible to do it. We must look at what are the low-hanging fruit, and then target it. Last thing I will say is Africans also need to determine what is our competitive advantage. So when we were speaking earlier, Mr. Emmanuel gave the example of India in ICT. And that's only 20 years ago. We've given the example of China in manufacturing. If I ask all of us who are sitting in the forum tonight, what is the competitive advantage that Africa has? You understand? We don't have a lot of competitive advantage today, but when it comes to things like music, when it comes to food, when it comes to art and craft, do you understand? When it comes to clothing, you know, fabrics, things like that, we have those competitive advantages. So why are we not building on that? So I think Mr. Coulibaly also said something that when you look at it, a lot of people think that the solutions is with the government. Not necessarily. The government only gives you a framework and allows things to work. But the people that change society are the individuals within that society. So we need to look at, okay, yes, one, believe that we can do it. Two, take example from people who have done it recently, identify our own competitive advantage, where we think we are best, and begin to focus on that. A few years ago, there was a very popular fabric company in Ghana called Woodin. I don't know if it's still there, but people used to go from everywhere in the world to go and buy Woodin clothing in Ghana. This was right there in Ghana, and it was known across the world. The quality was good, it was unique. People used to go there to buy it. We need to build on things like that. Small businesses that can grow up and employ people, and that's the way we're going to be able to build a continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Akintayo. And just as you said, I think that belief that it is possible, because that belief then allows us to build on that competitive advantage, and being able to, as you said, build or invest into some of those small businesses to see them grow. That's key, but that has to come from a belief that as a continent, this can be done. It's been done before. And so there's no reason why we should not be able to do this. Now, I also want to build upon what you said with the next question, even just in terms of incentivizing education, which also then creates opportunity for the next generation with my next question. So we know that Africa is the new land of opportunity. When we think of the population's age, we know that there is a young population. It's the youngest in the world in Africa. However, that large population is unemployed. So the next question is, do you think an investor should invest in mentoring or capacity building programs for African youth and women for a huge potential return and to create jobs in Africa? Is that something that's viable, and possibly how can it be done? And so I'll start with Mr. Coulibaly on this one.
Okay, thank you again. So, and that point, that is like in the heart of the immigration. If you see the International Organization for Immigration, that is, they say they need to keep young people in Africa. But how we can keep there, they need to provide job or something there. But how we see every day is they're gonna just die on the boat because they want to be in Europe or other continent. Even Canada, yes, have like an official program to bring the young people there, but they live from Africa. That is gonna be created another problem after we have a human resource problem there. Definitely, that is the only solution if we want to build, and the long-term Africa is our duty to create a job and sustainable job there, and there's a youth, girls and boys must get their job in Africa. But it's not like the job, but it's gonna be the job like they see the people in Canada or anywhere. They're really satisfied, they have really satisfaction for their job. So definitely, if we want to keep Africa high, and the point in terms of the population, and the projection say we're gonna get a lot of population. But how we can keep this population on the continent, we must create a job, and people need a job. If we don't do that, the people are gonna just die on the boat, or just the people are gonna just leave for the country like Canada. They have immigration program, or anywhere in other country, they have immigration program to bring the people. And other way, yes, we all lot people working to build Africa, like Casa Foundation, like EDEC, and everyone in each table too. We want to bring some to Africa. But our work is really like nothing if the people come on this side.
Yes, that's very true. Thank you so much, Mr. Coulibaly. I think you're right in saying that just because there's a large population of young people, it doesn't mean that they're going to stay. And so many of them are willing to risk it all, really, to seek better opportunity. But if we're able to create that in those countries, then they have reason to stay. We hear from so many Africans that there's no place like home. They would love to be home, but there's so few opportunities. And so that's key in terms of how do we keep that large young population in the continent. Mr. Duodu, I'll pass this on to you just to speak more about investing in mentoring or capacity building programs for African youth and women for a huge potential return and to create jobs in the continent as well.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And I think Mr. Coulibaly talked about it, but and also, I think one point that was made by Mr. Kintayo, he did give the Brazil example, and I think it's very important to re-emphasize that. There was an educator, in the 18th century in Ghana, and he said that if you educate a man, you educate an individual, but if you educate a woman, you educate the whole family and sometimes the whole society. And I think that speaks to what I want to, share here. When we empower our women, whether in business, whether in professions, in education, I think we're creating a strong foundation for society for a country. And I think that is, to me, is one of the cardinal points that any country or African countries, if we can invest in our women, if we can invest in young women, in education, in professions, then we are moving the continent to a level that, in fact, will create these opportunities for our population. And I say that for a reason, because in the past, historically, we've not done a good job in that. And I think, to me, that is one area we can create wealth for our people. And the second thing you talk about is about young people. I totally agree that we have a teeming young population, but with no opportunities. And sometimes, to me, I think the risks with having a lot of young people, and some of them highly educated, and very much well-versed in technology with no jobs. In fact, it's a national security risk. To me, that's the way I look at it. If you have a lot of young people who do not have anything to do, I think it should be, it can easily explode into a national security risk in a country. And that is why government leaders, business people have to pay attention. And the only thing too is that the risk is not only to Africa. To me, the world is so interconnected that the youth who going through a lot of issues in Africa can reverberate to other parts of the world. And that is why the problem of Africa is not only unique to African continent. I think on a moral standpoint, other countries, let's say in Canada or United States, have a moral obligation to making sure that, in fact, these young people who do not have anything, to invest in that or build capacity in these countries as well. But I also want to state that it is incumbent upon us, what I mean, those of us from that continent, that we can set that environment for people to tap into that. And I'm speaking to this to our leaders too in Africa. We have to create that enabling environment to attract that investment and reduce the risks in investment. And I think Mr. Akintayo talk about that a lot. He talked about risks. And I think that is the key. But I also want to state that we from the African continent should not be always seeking to, getting solutions from the Western world. There is a lot of things that we have that, in fact, if we can tap into it and we can market it, we can tell our own story. The issue with Africa is that people are telling our story, and that story is always negative. So with that, it drives away people who have the potential to invest in the continent. Now, when we look at it today, we have a continent of about 1.2 billion or more, 51 countries. Guess what? When something happens from Africa, a small part of Africa, or maybe a country in Africa, it's saying that, oh, this negative thing is happening from Africa. If something happens, let's say in the United States, we don't say it happened in North America. We say even sometimes you even mention a country or even a province. But in Africa, if anything, there is no country in this world without problems. All of us have our issues. But our issues that happen in Africa, in any country, is projected as is happening to about 1.2 billion people and 51 countries. And because we are not telling our own stories, attracting investment, building capacity is clouded by the negative stereotypes about that continent. But I think we have the potential. We have the people, we have the skill set, we have the climate, we have the fertile land. In fact, our advantages, and in fact, Mr. Akintayo will talk about it as well, that we have competitive advantages in many things, really. The land is there. The land is there, everything is there. The human capital even is evolving. So what we have to do is to make sure we tell our own story. We project the positive images of that country. And we are the people who have to tell our story, not the Western world, not the Western press. And I know we can do it. And I know we can succeed. We just have to believe in ourselves and tap into our own potential.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dodu. And you're right that we do need to be able to tell our own story, because that's always key. It depends on who's telling the story and whose lens we're looking through. And so often, as you said, when the story of Africa is told, sometimes it's told from one lens, one perspective, and it paints the whole continent as though it's a monolith, although it's just one entity in and of itself, just one nation, when in reality, there's so many differences there, and those stories need to be told. And thank you for also highlighting the importance of women entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurship and the need to invest in that as well, because that's very important. We've seen globally what that impact can do when you invest in women as well. So thank you so much. I'll pass it on to you, Mr. Akintayo, for any additional thoughts here. In terms of investing in mentoring or capacity building programs for African youth and women.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy, honestly, to hear other people make some of those points today, because I, for the last 10 years, I've always been an advocate of Africans telling African stories. And I always give an example of this. I said, 20 years ago, people treated a lot of Arabs the same way they treat Africans today. The only thing that is different today is that Arabs they're telling their own story. They have the Al Jazeera network. They're telling their story through what they're doing in Dubai. They're telling their story through what they're doing in Qatar. Africans need to do that. Until we sell our own story, we will not make much progress. Now, but let me tell you why I think this is also very important, because we already had some success stories from the continent. I don't know whether it was Mr. Emmanuel who said that or Mr. Kulubali. If you look at someone like Julius Nyerere from Tanzania back in the day, people called him the teacher because he focused on education. You look at in Nigeria, like Obafemi Awolowo from Nigeria, he ran a program of free education, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that Southwestern Nigeria is still benefiting from today, 30, 40 years after, So we have success stories already in this same sector across the continent that is clear. The problem is that in the last few years, we've allowed those success stories to degenerate. I'll give the other example from Nigeria, such that today, when you talk about Nigeria, people are now saying there's now 10 to 15 million children who are out of the school system in Nigeria today. 10 to 15 million, that's a lot. And like Mr. Dudu said, if you have 10 to 15 million children out of the school system, it's a security risk, right? It's a security risk, and that's why you're having all the security problems that you're having across West Africa today. Too many children are out of school. What are the other countries that have similar problem? Afghanistan, Pakistan. If you go to those kind of places, there are too many children who are out of the school system. They have significant security issues. Okay, so that's a second issue. Now, I just want to say, I want to then link that to the issue of the jobs. Mr. Koulibaly made mention of that, when he was giving his own response earlier. We need to be able to fashion out our own solutions. Mr. Emmanuel also mentioned that, our own solution, which tailors into job creation. How do I mean? We don't always have to go for the degrees. There's so many degrees which are not contributing jobs. If you look at the average African, many of us here on this forum tonight are Africans. It's not uncommon to see an African who has 3 degrees. 3 degrees, he's got a master's, he's got an MBA, he's got this, he's got that. But some of our colleagues who are from the Western world, if he has a BSc, he's done very well. Do you understand? What they are able to do, though, which we don't have, is that they have technical skills, vocational skills. They can do bricklaying, they can do electrical work, they can do carpentry, they have more hands-on experience in doing those kind of things. And what that does for them is that whether the formal education works or not, they're able to create businesses, they're able to feed their families because they have vocational skills. And we need to go back to that. I'm very familiar with what happens in Nigeria, for example. It's not uncommon in Nigeria, which I'm familiar with, to see people who have MSCs and BScs and MBAs being bank tellers. Yeah? You don't need more than a grade 10 skill to do a bank teller job, because all that you need is bookkeeping skills. Do you see what I mean? So basically, we need to redefine our education system and tailor it to the job market. Give people vocational skills such that if their formal education doesn't work, they can work, they can at least continue to sustain themselves and feed their families. So it comes back to what Mr. Dudu said, our own solution. We've done it before. We have some experience before in the 60s and the 70s, which was successful. We need to go back to that, to some of that, borrow from other people, and tailor a solution that works for us, and then tell our own story from that standpoint. I think this is what we need to do, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Akintayo. And I think it's true in terms of taking a look at maybe rethinking how we think of education, how we think of formal education as the only type of education that can lead you to a viable opportunity. Because as you said, when we start to also look at some of those technical skills, some of those vocational skills, they can open up the door to entrepreneurship in such a way that's very beneficial to the continent. So thank you so much for that. Now, I do want to circle back to something that you said earlier, and we'll start with you. And also something that Mr. Duodu also mentioned is that we know that there's no one investment strategy that can be implemented across a continent. And so there are many lessons that can be drawn from prior experiences of businesses who have invested in Africa. Now, although we know that the solutions from Africa can also come from within Africa, we also know that we have Africans who are in the diaspora who can also contribute to some of those solutions. So how can the African diaspora build bridges between the African continent and Canadian businesses in order for them to be able to work together in building the continent? And I'll start with you, Mr. Tayo.
Thank you very much. I'll give a good example. I'll give an example, a practical example rather than drag. There's a company called Main One. They operate in Nigeria, they operate in Ghana. I don't know whether you are familiar with the lady who runs this company. Today is $1 billion business in Africa. And how did she start this business? This lady used to work for Verizon in the US. And then she was called in to be a consultant when they started privatizing some of the businesses in Africa. And the privatization system did not work when they started privatizing telecom sector in Nigeria. She worked for them as a consultant from Verizon. It did not work out. But what she did was that she brought her experience knowing that that system was going to work to start Main One. Today, they are providing a lot of cable, the IT connection, the fiber optic connections, subsea cables and all of that. It's $1 billion business. And I think actually when people say other continents come and give us money a lot, I actually think the biggest people who can help the continent are diaspora. I believe about 2 or 3 years ago, they said the total amount of money that was remitted to Nigeria from diaspora was in excess of $50 billion. That's how much the diaspora is sending home already. Now, the only problem is that we're sending that money home to eat, to support families. So we're not using that money at a strategic level. And that's where you and I come in, all of us who are here. I mean, whether we're bringing our experience from banking, we're bringing it from project management, like some of our panelists tonight are, we're bringing it from various areas. We need to be able to network better, write better agreements, and pull our resources together, to be able to invest in Africa. I'll give one last example before I close. Very, very simple example, agriculture. Agriculture on the continent is still done at subsistence level, and this is a major problem, but it's not that expensive. In Canada, for example, many of our people here have homes which are $500,000, yeah? Or you're in the UK, a typical 3-bed, 4-bed is £500,000. If you took £500,000 to Nigeria today, that's almost £500 million naira, in local currency. £500 million naira, easily, you can set up a 1,000 hectare farm, and you can employ 1,000 people by just selling one house in the UK. The problem, like I keep saying, is that we are not willing to take the risk. We'll keep 2 houses, one house is empty, we're renting it for $1,000 a month. We're not operating at a strategic level. And my message to a lot of people that I talk to is Africans need to start thinking outside the box and start thinking at strategic level. If you have £500 million and you put that into a business in Africa, you can employ 1,000 people and stop all of this story that we have. Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's as clear as day, honestly. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And I think just taking from what you said there, that need for strategic investment, because just the figure that you mentioned around remittances, that's significant. But as you said, that's going towards subsistence. But if that can be invested strategically, if when we look at what we're investing here in some, be it, real estate or whatever it may be, how can we invest strategically in the different countries in Africa? Definitely, I think that creates the bridge of opportunity, because that money can go much further in those African nations. So thank you so much for that. I'll pass it on to Mr. Duodu.
Yeah, so no, I think that's great points being made by Mr. Akintayo here and also Mr. Coulibaly. But I think also wanted to add to it that, there is a saying that trust comes in very good steps, just come in tiny, tiny steps. But trust also can, just fly out on a Ferrari. So to me, what that means is that if we have to entice investment into the continent, whether it is, African in diaspora or whether even they are Westerners, I think we have to create that environment. And I, some of the things were mentioned by, Mr. Akintayo as well, and I think Mr. Coulibaly as well. But what I'm trying to say is that you want to invest in Africa. Number one, the investor cannot control security. It's the government that has to do that. What that means is that security, red tape, the investor cannot do that. So if I'm here and I have maybe $100, I want to invest in Africa, or let's say Nigeria or Ghana. It should not take me 1 week for me to go through a business registration. It shouldn't be. We have to leverage digitization in such a way that this thing can be done very fast. And also providing security. That is important. These are things that have to be done by the government to be able to create that enabling environment for countries or individuals, those of us in diaspora, so that we'll be able to, do that. And we have some success stories about Africans in diaspora who have gone back. I know somebody who was working in Microsoft and went back home and set up a huge university. And guess what? He's leveraging the experience, the knowledge, and the exposure to a corporate work in Microsoft to be able to build things in Ghana. And there are a lot of them. I know some people who left their, great jobs over here and went back and made investment in hospitality industry. There are so many of them. And I keep coming back to the thing that if we don't tell the success stories, then of course, how do we get others to know that, look, I can do it too, really? And there are trailblazers there. I just met someone who is a Caribbean from Grenada who went and said, look, I went and invested in Ghana and I want to go to other countries. These stories have to be chronicled in such a way that it will be a motivating factor for other people to be able to invest. And I know we can do it. I'm always a can-do spirit guy who believes that if others have trailed, there, then others can also be able to do that. But we have to tell that empowering story to let people know that there are other Africans in diaspora who have done it and continue to do it. And the fact that one person failed doesn't mean that we should stop. Life is like that. You fail and you get up. That to me is life. It's not only even in investment. We have to have the mindset that yes, things will happen. There will be issues, but we have to be determined and resilient and continue pushing forward. And I think we can. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jodu. And it's I think even us as Africans, we need to hear more of those success stories in order for us to be encouraged and know that these things can be done. So certainly for those who are not part of the African community, but even for those who are a part of it, we need to hear those stories so that we know that it can be done as well. Thank you so much. And Mr. Coulibaly, I'll pass this question on to you as well, just in terms of how it is that the African diaspora can build bridges between the African continent and Canadian businesses.
Yeah, definitely, the need is there. Talk about the term of the labor. So can just quickly give the example. 10 years ago, I know so many companies in Canada, they're doing the tax filing in India. They have the people, and at that time it was like the biggest scandal because the social number of a lot of Canadian and throwing in India. But that is like really, really sensitive. But how my last traveling in Europe, I find one black man. He have a call center in Senegal, Dakar, and he provide for so many enterprises in Europe. So that means that we have a lot of successful for entrepreneurship and collaborating to between the business in Europe or Canada or United States in Africa. So definitely we need the businesses there, need the people from Africa, and the Africa, we need maybe the job from there. I think we must work together, and we have a lot of success stories, success to follow. We can talk.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. Making those connections in terms of can we identify a need on either side, particularly in the diaspora, and then also see if that need can be met on the continent. That's key. Thank you so much. This has been so insightful. I've learned so much listening to the three of you as you've shared and you've responded to these questions, and I thank you so much. If you have any final thoughts, I think maybe we'll just do one more round to see if you have any final thoughts thoughts around the topic at hand. And I'll start off with Mr. Coulibaly, and then we'll move on to Mr. Akintayo and close with Mr. Duodu, please.
Okay, thank you very much again to give me this opportunity again to talk also for African people and Africa Day. And I remember from the organization I lead today is African Diaspora in Canada. So if this association was created, it was created by the vision of the president from South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, and the president from Senegal, Abdoulaye Wade. And at that time, we have a program they call NEPAD. And that vision, that was really the vision, how the diaspora can bring something in Africa to build economic, doing a business and everything. So that we must do. But if I am also before my leadership, all people who's in this association, there are like political side and everything. But after my analyze, I realize we must build ourselves there first, and before we can bring something in Africa. That's why I'm really happy and glad to see the organization in Canada, like CASA Foundation, or also the program we get this year to help African Black people in Canada first. And if we are build the hardest there, and we can bring before something in Africa. So thank you again, and good luck for everyone. And again, happy Africa Day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Coulibaly. Mr. Akintayo?
Yes, I'll just echo Mr. Coulibaly there. Firstly, to say thank you to CASA Foundation for giving us this opportunity again, to gather, to exchange ideas. I will say Happy Africa Day. My key takeaway from our discussion today is the fact that we Africans should also think that we can tell our own story. There are success stories from the continent. We need to be able to take it out and use that to encourage the next generation and to think at a strategic level. But thank you so much for having us tonight. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Akintayo. And Mr. Duodu?
Oh, yeah, I just want to echo, the positive messages here from Mr. Coulibaly and also Mr. Akintayo, and I think for me, I'm just like all of us here, I'm kind of an optimist about that continent. I think that continent is on upward trajectory. And I want anyone who is listening to this, whether you're a potential investor, whether you're African in diaspora or wherever you are, join the bus to invest in that continent. A lot of great things are happening. Don't sit on the fence. Whatever you do over here has a huge social implications on the people. And I think this continent has so much potential. And I also want to thank Dr. Oyedele also for the great work she's doing at CASA Foundation. And Ms. Jones, thank you for moderating this beautifully. I know that this is going to be a beginning, but today is an African Day. And I'm concluding on that note that this continent has survived, is resilient, and will survive, and will continue to make headway throughout the world. So I just want to encourage you, like Mr. Akintayo said, there are great things happening. Be part of that renaissance. Be part of that movement. And I know we can build that continent. And we are on the way to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Duodu. Thank you, Mr. Coulibaly, and thank you, Mr. Akintayo. This has just been a wealth and a moment or an hour of just great knowledge in terms of us really getting to think about how it is that in the diaspora we can build the African continent, but also what can happen internally. So I'm certainly inspired by the conversation that has happened here, the ideas that have come up. It's just been phenomenal. And I just want to thank each one of you just for what you've shared today. Thank you so much. And thank you to to the CASA Foundation as well, just for creating this platform for us to be able to have this conversation, and to all those who've been listening as well. I think there's just been so much to learn. So thank you so much. And Emma, I'll pass it back on to you.
Thank you so much, Shidza, for moderating this roundtable discussion tonight, to Dr. Ulu for her keynote speech, and of course to our esteemed panelists, Mr. Akintayo, Mr. Coulibaly, and Mr. Duru. Your insights on this topic have been so inspiring, and I've been looking at the comments from people watching at home, and they've been saying that not only have they learned a lot from your discussions, you've also inspired people to invest in Africa, we can see from the chat. So finally, on behalf of CASA Foundation, I would like to thank everyone who is watching from home. It was a pleasure to have you with us as well. So friends, this brings us to the end of our session. I hope you all enjoyed it. To get more information about our upcoming events and new sessions, please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. You can also go to our website, www.casafoundation.ca, to learn more about our programs. Once again, thank you to everyone for joining us, and happy Africa Day. Thank you.
Thank you.